So I'm going to talk about our paper titled Beyond Fairness, Reparative Algorithms to Address Injustice of Housing Discrimination in the US. We start by introducing one assumption in fairness in machine learning. So people represented in the data have been fairly treated throughout the history. Is this statement really true? Absolutely not if we talk about housing discrimination in the US because of the private and state-sanctioned discrimination around housing have been perpetuated. So for instance, here it shows the distribution of the loan-to-value ratio and debt-to-income ratio by a loan applicant race. It basically shows that black borrowers have less income and wealth and more debt. All of this can be an example of historical bias. So in this paper, we suggest a reparative approach in algorithmic justice to address the historical bias. So in this case, reparations mean the full acknowledgement of past harms and figuring out the ways of redressing the past and ongoing harm. So the case study 1 identifies historical bias, and then case study 2 explores how machine learning can be applied not for risk assessment, but for assessing the reparative potential for policy interventions. And the first step of the reparative approach is identifying historical bias. So we use two data sets. One is residential security maps made by a homeowners loan corporation in the 1930s, in which they graded mortgage security from A to D. And we match with the historical census data listed here. And we employed causal inference method to figure out the counterfactual situations. So the treatment variable here is whether or not the neighbor was assigned as D, and this is the result of the average treatment effect of the treatment on the treated. First, it shows that after the fair housing was enacted, the home ownership of the non-white people was more concentrated in the gray neighborhoods. And median home value was always lower in the gray neighborhood. And lastly, the ROI difference converged and even flipped in the 2010s, but the foreclosure crisis rolled back everything. So this study further suggests that without bringing historical context, applying only fairness criteria in algorithmic decision making in mortgage lending in the US is unsatisfactory and unfair. And the second study estimates the financial resources for supporting today's black borrowers, and it aims to calculate the cost that is needed for black borrowers who got rejected to get a prime loan to be accepted. And it uses Home Mortgage Disclosure Act 2020 data. For calculating the cost of housing reparations, we relied on previous literature on algorithmic recourse, particularly the actionable recourse paper. So this framework and method provide ways of actionable recourse if one was negatively categorized from a linear classifier by testing a grid of action sets of features. For conventional loans, the total cost of down payment assistance would be $891 million, or $41,256 per person on average. And the total cost of debt relief assistance would be $3.6 million per month, or $205 per month per person on average. For FHA loans, the total cost of debt relief assistance would be $26 million per month, or $578 per month per person on average. So using the result, we can examine the effectiveness of local housing reparations programs. For instance, Evanston, Illinois granted a $25,000 per black descendant for housing-related expenses. Using $25, only 27% could flip the decision when they were in conventional loans, or 66% of the people could flip the decision if they spent $25,000 per 2 years paying their debt. We hope that this work bridges between local housing-based reparation programs and algorithmic accountability by developing ways to measure the cost of housing-based reparations. Thank you.